Gaming journalism isn't what you think. It's actually much worse. Gaming journalism is supposed to be the connection between gamers and the industry, right? Yet that connection is rotting from the inside, eaten away by corruption, hidden agendas, unchecked greed, and a powerful elite controlling the narrative. Instead of a fair and balanced exchange, we're left with a system where trust erodes, voices are silenced, and the truth is buried under layers of manipulation. Let's just say there's a reason why games from AAA publishers with massive marketing budgets usually seem to get glowing reviews, even when players are left scratching their heads. It's no secret that those with the deepest pockets can afford to grease the wheels of coverage, ensuring their titles dominate headlines and get a more forgiving critique. So whether it's exclusive preview events, lavish press kits, or advertising deals that conveniently align with review cycles, the cozy relationship between the big publishers and gaming media often raises eyebrows. And for smaller developers, well, let's just say their games have to fight a much tougher battle to earn the same spotlight. But what if I told you that the majority of gaming news sites reviewing the games you buy are either owned by or heavily affiliated with just two massive companies? That's right, most of the outlets you trust for unbiased reviews are operating under the same corporate umbrellas, where profits and partnerships often outweigh honesty. These media giants control the narratives, prioritize their own interests, and ensure the games that bring in the most ad revenue or align with their sponsors will likely always get top billing. So today we are diving headfirst into the murky waters of gaming media, exposing the powerful forces that decide what you see, what you read, and what you believe. From silenced voices to manufactured narratives, this isn't just about games. It's about control. I am Lady Decade. Enjoy my independent voice and hit that subscribe button, as this is a deep dive into who actually controls gaming journalism and the elites who have destroyed honest gaming news and reviews. Dishonest or generally poor game journalism has always been incredibly frustrating for us, the players. Not only do shallow or inaccurate reviews undermine our trust, but they can also lead to us feeling misled and clueless about a game's actual quality. Imagine spending your hard-earned money on a game hyped up by glowing reviews, only to find it riddled with bugs, shallow gameplay, ideological agendas, and a lack of polish. This is the problem we face when we realise the reviews may have been influenced by marketing deals or corporate relationships and political bias, rather than genuine critique. For players who rely on honest coverage to make informed decisions, it feels like the system isn't just failing them, it's actively working against them, which is why checking out what user review scores games have been receiving is becoming increasingly important. Trusting these corporate mouthpieces is a tall order, but thankfully we have user reviews to rely on for honest opinions. Even better, you can support independent voices like mine while snacking huge discounts on some of the best user-acclaimed games out there. Score massive savings on titles like Metaphor, Sparking Zero, Black Myth, Wukong, Space Marine 2, and so many more by clicking the link in the pinned comment. There are thousands of deals to choose on, so don't miss out. By breaking free from the influence of gaming media conglomerates, we can focus on what truly matters, celebrating the games that deserve recognition and holding the industry accountable when it falls short. This is exactly what I'm trying my best to do with this video. Whenever I search for a newly released game on Google to learn more, the results almost always highlight review scores, usually from the same familiar outlets like IGN and Eurogamer. While these dominate the top spots, scrolling further down reveals a wider range of reviews. This is where the platform Metacritic comes in handy, compiling reviews from across the web and offering an aggregated score to give a broader perspective from game journalism's many outlets. While this might initially seem like a brilliant way to get a fairer, more balanced picture, the reality couldn't be further from the truth. As outlined earlier, a significant number of these outlets feeding review scores into Metacritic are owned or heavily influenced by the same two parent companies. But here's the kicker. Metacritic itself isn't some neutral, independent arbiter of quality, no. It's actually owned by one of these corporate giants too. That's right, the so-called aggregator platform that you're trusting to offer an unbiased view is just another cog in the same massive profit-driven machine, and just another further tool that has been created to feed traffic back to the other websites they own. With a massive chunk of reviews coming from outlets controlled by just 2 parent companies, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why gaming journalism is even more biased than it first appears. The illusion of diverse opinions quickly crumbles when you realise it's all coming from the same tightly controlled sources, largely spinning the same narratives about the biggest Western releases to serve their own interests. So let's be real, how much trust can you place in a system where most of the important players are all on the same 2 teams? Instead of providing clarity, it perpetuates the same cycle of influence and manipulation designed to funnel players towards titles that suit their agenda. Which is, of course, extremely alarming when you sit back and think about it for a moment. Advertising lies at the heart of many of the problems plaguing game journalism. Most outlets depend heavily on ad revenue to survive, and a substantial chunk of that revenue comes from the very publishers whose games they're tasked with reviewing. When publishers are paying for banner ads, sponsored articles, or promotional campaigns, an unavoidable conflict of interest arises. A scathing review could jeopardize those lucrative deals, so critiques are often softened, flaws downplayed, and problems overlooked. For gamers, this means the content they consume is frequently tailored to appease advertisers rather than to provide honest, unbiased perspectives. Adding to this is the issue of access media, which creates a deeply compromised relationship between journalists and publishers. Publishers control access to early game builds, exclusive previews, and behind-the-scenes content that media outlets rely on to attract audiences. This access, however, comes with unspoken strings attached. Being overly critical risks losing invitations to future events or access to key releases. As a result, honest critique often takes a backseat to keeping publishers on side. These dynamics create an environment where reviews are often watered down and critiques are hesitant, especially when it comes to the big-budget AAA titles. At the same time, smaller or less polished games, those without the marketing dollars to influence coverage, are frequently overlooked or treated unfairly. For example, outlets like IGN might have no qualms about delivering harsh criticism to an indie title, giving it a surprisingly low 3 out of 10 to a game that, in my opinion, deserved far better. The charming Empire of the Ants, for example. Meanwhile, an average AAA game with a massive marketing budget might get inflated scores, like a generous 9 out of 10, to maintain cozy relationships with publishers like EA. I'm of course looking at you, the Vanguard. It's a glaring double standard that highlights how financial incentives and corporate ties often take precedence over honest, balanced evaluations that are in the interests of gamers themselves. This system not only distorts the industry's landscape, but also erodes trust between players and the media. It's a vicious cycle that prioritizes corporate relationships over transparency, leaving gamers with a skewed and curated narrative instead of the truth they deserve. But of course, to make matters worse, you realize that a significant portion of this nonsense is being churned out from the mechanisms of just the 2 massive parent companies. So, who are the greedy puppet masters pulling all the strings? Let's dive in and start unraveling these tangled corporate webs of manipulation, beginning with one of the most notorious sites in the industry. After all, you can't spell ignorant without IGN, and naturally, it finds itself as a huge part of these webs of control. IGN, or Imagine Games Network, launched in the late 1990s, riding the wave of the internet's early popularity to establish itself as a dominant force in gaming media. From the beginning, it's positioned itself as the go-to source for gaming news, reviews, and previews, but its meteoric rise wasn't exactly innocent. With deep-pocketed investors and corporate backing, IGN quickly outmaneuvered smaller independent outlets, consolidating power in a rapidly growing industry. It used its influence to form those now infamous cozy relationships with major publishers, ensuring it had access to exclusive content while subtly shaping the narrative to benefit its benefactors. What appeared to be a platform for gamers was, in reality, a machine fueled by advertising dollars and a relentless drive to control the conversation around games, leaving transparency and independent voices in the dust. But if you're a long-time fan of video games, you know that the final boss isn't always the enemy you expect it to be. There's often a bigger fish behind the scenes, and soon that bigger fish would arrive, but to understand that we need to look to a company known as Ziff Davis. Unlike IGN, which only emerged in the mid-90s, Ziff Davis had been controlling the media for close to 100 years. With a media empire that dates back to the 1920s, it was experienced in acquiring media publications for profit. Originally a publisher of hobbyist magazines, this would eventually lead them down a rabbit hole publishing video game magazines, but if you know your history, you will be able to recall that interest in them faded and they would cancel, for example, the official PlayStation magazine, one of the many rags they would publish. With this style of media losing traction, on the 5th of March 2008, Ziff Davis Media Incorporated announced that it had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in order to restructure its debt and operations. In 2010, private equity firm Great Hill Partners took over Ziff Davis, partnering with Vivek Shah to transform it from a modest operation into a digital empire. Shah aggressively acquired smaller properties like Geek.com and Focus Research, laying the groundwork for a media powerhouse. But this aggressive repositioning didn't stop there. In 2012, Ziff Davis was sold to J2 Global for a whopping $167 million, fueling its expansion. After rebranding back to Ziff Davis in 2013, they acquired IGN Entertainment and shut down smaller sites like OneUp.com and GameSpy.com, other entities they had bought up to focus on flagship brands, eliminating competition and consolidating control in the online game journalism space. From that same year onward, the insidious Ziff Davis went on a buying spree, acquiring NetShelter, Ookla, as in speedtest.net, and Mashable, stripping them down to maximize their pursuit of ad revenue. By 2018, Ziff Davis was reaching 117 million readers across 115 countries, using international partnerships to repurpose content and extend its reach. But to really put their corporate aggression and domination into perspective, we need to address what has happened this year in 2024. Back in May, their IGN Entertainment brand would acquire and absorb the Gamer Network in one single swoop, gaining control and ownership over Eurogamer, VG247, GamesIndustry.biz, Rock Paper Shotgun, and Dicebreakers. Oh yeah, and according to GamesIndustry.biz, and now under this evil empire's control, they would also gain shares in Outside Xbox, Digital Foundry, and Hookshot Media, the same group that owns Nintendo Life, Push Square, Pure Xbox, and Time Extension. That's a terrifying amount of game news sites and review sources, all living under one corporate umbrella. How can we possibly trust that any of these publications have gamers' best interests at heart when they're all ultimately funneling money to the same mega corporation? These outlets, wanting to be seen as trusted voices of the gaming community, now serve as mere puppets for the very same conglomerates. Ziff Davis's rise has systematically silenced independent voices and prioritized profit over integrity. For gamers, this monopolization means fewer honest critiques and more corporate-controlled narratives, turning once trusted platforms into polished machines of manipulation. Let's be clear, their allegiance isn't to gamers, it's to the bottom line. So it's unsurprising that in many cases, reviews feel softened when they are working as one to appease the same advertisers. This is why, in my opinion, at least as far as the biggest releases go, I believe that critical voices are muted to maintain relationships with publishers, as the very platforms that should be holding the industry accountable are essentially all in fact singular giant platforms complicit in its manipulation. This isn't journalism. This is like traditional legacy media. It's CNN and Fox Fox News level bullshit. It's corporate propaganda disguised as content. Every click, every ad, and every glowing review for a AAA game lines the pockets of the very same entity, ensuring the cycle of greed and control continues. No wonder toxic positivity on these websites is running roughshod. Ziff Davis's grip reaches far beyond the brands it outright owns, slyly weaving its influence into affiliated platforms like Nintendo Life, which we just mentioned. To their credit, on their website, they rather transparently outline where their revenue sources come from, which makes for an interesting read. All of their website advertising and sales agreements are made by, surprise surprise, Ziff Davis Incorporated, and any paid promotion or sponsored content they work on, you guessed it, Ziff Davis agrees on all of those too. They frame all of these business dealings as harmless, as they supposedly don't interfere with editorial independence, but in my opinion, this setup still presents a clear conflict of interest, no matter how much it's dressed up as independent. By outsourcing advertising and sales agreements to Ziff Davis, the platform essentially hands over the financial backbone of its operations to a corporate giant with its own vested interests. While advertisers might not directly dictate editorial decisions, the reliance on Ziff Davis to secure and manage ad revenue creates an implicit pressure to align content with the interests of advertisers and the corporation itself. When your financial lifeline is tied to an entity that profits from fostering relationships with major publishers and advertisers, maintaining true independence becomes nearly impossible. Editorial decisions may not be explicitly influenced, but the mere fact that Ziff Davis controls the flow of revenue ensures that certain lines won't be crossed, and certain criticisms may be softened. It's a subtle yet powerful mechanism of control. Claiming complete independence feels more like a convenient fiction than a reality. Although, let's be honest, it feels like these game journalists have never written an honest sentence in their lives, so what's new in all of this? As mentioned at the beginning of this video, Ziff Davis is sadly not the only cancer eating away at the integrity of gaming journalism. A similar conglomerate has swallowed up large chunks of the corporate game reviewing landscape. Fandom Incorporated, originally founded in 2004 by Wikipedia co-founders Jimmy Wales and Angela Beasley, has evolved into a corporate behemoth with a voracious appetite for dominance in the digital entertainment and gaming industries. Their predatory rise began modestly but quickly turned aggressive. In 2018, they snapped up Screen Junkies, adding entertainment news and commentary to their growing empire. By 2019, they had consumed Curse Media, assimilating a vast network of gaming wikis and tools to cement their grip on fan communities. This was just the beginning. In 2021, they acquired Fanatical, an e-commerce platform for video game sales, because why not squeeze revenue from every possible angle of fandom? Then came their crowning moment of hubris in 2022, the acquisition of several high-profile brands from Red Ventures, including GameSpot, Metacritic, Giants Bomb, and TV Guide. This not-so-subtle power grab turned fandom into the 14th largest ad-supported site in the US, while all cloaking their expansion in the guise of supporting fans. With this move, they effectively became a one-stop shop for gaming and entertainment, controlling reviews, fan forums, and even e-commerce. A sprawling web designed to keep users tethered to their ecosystem. Critics rightly argue that fandom's aggressive acquisition spree reeks of monopolistic ambition, tightening its stranglehold on what once were diverse independent voices in the gaming and entertainment sectors. But this seems like nothing in the space in comparison to the sprawling dominance and influence of Ziff Davis. With its annual revenue of $1.37 billion and a market cap hovering around $2.5 billion, this corporate juggernaut uses its vast financial clout to dominate the online space every day before our very eyes. It's all crazy, really. Ziff Davis's rise to power reads like the villainous plot of a dystopian saga. With every acquisition, it silenced more and more independent voices and funneled control into fewer hands. Its sprawling empire now dictates the narratives consumers see, prioritizing profit and corporate gluttony over transparency or integrity. For gamers, this isn't just a consolidation of media, it's the slow death of honest critique and independent thought, leaving a slick, polished machine of manipulation in its place. We now have a systemic issue on our hands where power and wealth consolidate into the hands of a few, leaving gamers with a media landscape dominated by shallow coverage and biased reporting. Whether it's another mega corporation or a smaller player mimicking the same tactics, the result is the same. The erosion of trust, the marginalisation of smaller developers, and the perpetuation of a culture where the needs of players are consistently ignored. Ziff Davis might be a prominent example, but it's far from the only culprit in this morally bankrupt system. While all of this is undeniably a huge issue, even in the darkness there is always light. Independent voices on YouTube and social media have risen to challenge the dominance of legacy media, offering perspectives that feel more honest, relatable and unfiltered. These creators, significantly less shackled by corporate interests and advertiser agendas, to many have become more trusted sources for millions of gamers seeking genuine insights and critiques, and rightly so. Our growing influence is proof that players are tired of the hollow, marketing-driven narratives pushed by conglomerates and are instead turning to individuals who prioritise authenticity. Through platforms like YouTube, Twitch and even smaller communities on platforms like Discord, they're fostering real conversations, building trust and highlighting games and developers that legacy media ignores or chooses to try and tarnish. Together, we are all shining a light on the cracks in the system, empowering each other to make informed decisions without relying on the manipulated reviews and biased coverage of the big players. As I mentioned earlier in the video, if you want to add a great game to your collection, don't rely on corporate mouthpieces for honest opinions. Instead, check out user review scores for much more honest and open feedback. Relying on these websites is a tough pill to swallow, but thankfully user reviews offer a much needed alternative. Even better, you can support independent voices like mine while grabbing incredible discounts on some of the most user-acclaimed games out there. Save big on titles like Metaphor, Sparking Zero, Black Myth, Wukong, Space Marine 2, and so many more by clicking the link in the pinned comment. With thousands of deals available, now's the perfect time to snag a bargain. But if you really enjoyed today's video and want to support me in an even more personal way, then gain access to my cosplay library and more by becoming a backer over on Patreon. I'll see you all again very soon.